California versus the Trump administration. Before Trump returns to the White House, state leaders are already working to protect California's progressive policies from the upcoming Trump administration. This morning, we're joined by political strategist Naila Amaru. Naila, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Naila, one thing that you point out here is states are supposed to be the firewalls to the Trump White House here. So let's talk about some of the issues that we could be facing here. Mass deportations, of course, a big topic that we heard talked about during the campaign. And of course, that talk has not died down. Trump has promised the largest deportation program in American history. He appointed a so-called border czar yesterday. California, home to the country's largest immigrant population here. What can the governor or the state do to battle back against that, especially in a state where undocumented immigrants make up an estimated 50 to 75% of the state's agriculture workforce?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to understand, the sphere that federalism gives the power at the federal level, but also more importantly, or just as importantly, are the powers of the state, where there are limitations of federal power, to include issues such as education, healthcare, criminal justice, and a lot of the local issues that impact our everyday lives. First and foremost, it's really important through the political lens to take advantage of sanctuary policies, right, in areas such as immigration, where there is a very, very clear, distinct, and imminent threat of massive deportation. Local governments can absolutely adopt sanctuary policies, which limit the cooperation with federal authorities. They can restrict law enforcement from helping with federal immigration enforcement, helping to provide some protection to undocumented residents. States also have the power to pass safeguard rights, passing laws that expand those civil rights that protect our undocumented workers through the legal way, as states are, in fact, the firewalls that protect from federal policies coming from the Trump White House.
Let me ask you this. So we say sanctuary policies could potentially protect these immigrants here from deportation, but what about folks like DACA recipients and the threat of removing the DACA protections from the hundreds of thousands of people who are under DACA and be able to work here and go to school here in this country? What happens to DACA recipients in the United States and even here in California? Isn't it a federal, that's a federal coverage for DACA recipients, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think this is where we lean into the old adage, try but true, all politics is local. Every representative has to answer to their constituents. And I think this is a really important part where people organizing and mobilizing, particularly through organizations or coalitions, really through their ability to engage civically and be involved in the political process, really are that counterpoint to what is happening locally. Because representatives have to go back and answer for what is being done in their own way. So I do think that there are opportunities to, at the local level, through engagement, through fighting back, through being mobilized, through organizing, again, at a local level or through institutional organizations, to help prevent some of the damage that will be coming from the Trump White House.
All right, so let's talk education now, because the Trump White House has talked about eliminating the Department of Education. California Superintendent of Public Schools, Tony Thurmond, has said that would mean the cut of $8 billion in public funding for schools here. Governor Newsom traveling to the White House now to get some protections for California in place here. How can the state battle back against potential cuts? I mean, $8 billion in school funding from public education is a steep cut that would affect schools all across the state. What can be done to protect that?
Absolutely. So I think that there are areas to look at. One, clearly funding. Two, it's the continuation of state-driven educational standards and assessment, and also the impact on higher education. When it comes to cuts, again, State Department of Education and funding, really making sure that California has the ability to reinforce its own DOE to handle those responsibilities that might otherwise come from the federal level. We're looking at data collection, we're looking at oversight, we're looking at those establishment of educational standards, and of course finding ways to increase state funding for education, so to compensate for a potential loss that is coming from the federal level. There are ways to reallocate the budgets, find new funding sources, education bonds, And this is the funding that's going to help maintain the programming that would otherwise be affected. So there's not a severe disruption if it should come down to the fact that our federal DOE is in fact abolished. That making sure that we have the funding in place for low-income schools and special education grants in particular.
Yeah, so severe funding would definitely put a disruption to student learning across the state if that were to happen. Now, Amaru, thank you so much for joining us this morning, providing your insight into what could be to come here and how the state is preparing for it. We appreciate your time.